Welcome to Flappers, folks. I tell you, this prohibition thing is tough. I said, that's a fine how do you do. See?
Do we even need to mention age? But I think it's respectful to mention age because you, I know, just had your 50th year of stand-up comedy.
Yes, I started in 1975 in New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first joke?
Oh, my first joke. Well, the first...
Bitches right now.
No, the first joke that I wrote, yes, was going to an intellectual high school. Because I thought people were still doing jokes about going to tough schools in New York. You know, like it was so tough that, you know, our school newspaper had an obituary column. You know, I thought people were doing those kind of jokes still, and they weren't. Comedy had moved on, but I didn't. I had no idea because didn't know anything about comedy. So I wrote kind of the opposite kind of routine about going to an intellectual high school, and I would tell jokes in Latin, and it turns out no one in New York thought that was funny.
But I mean, did you just walk on into a comedy club and go on stage and...
I went to Catch a Rising Star.
Okay.
And stood in line, and I stood next to a guy, a comic from Boston, who he said, how much material do you have? And I said, oh, I probably have 5 minutes because that's what you needed, but I had no idea how long it would last. And he said, oh, I've got 2 hours. And I went, 2 hours of material? You know, I had scratched to get 5 minutes, and I didn't even know if it would go 5 minutes.
And
so,
do you remember who that comic was?
It was Mike. I'm blank on his last name. No.
Somebody famous now or not?
No.
At the time?
Yeah, he's become more of a writer, I think, than a comic. He's a writer.
But you just, out of nowhere, decided, I'm going to go do stand-up and try it?
I had been watching. I'd been going to clubs that would let you in free, and so they were really bad comedy. It was
just like today.
Well,
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, it was like Folk City we would go to, which was a folk club, and you could just pick your name out of a hat, and people would go on. So it was mostly folk singers. You'd sit through dreary folk singers all night, just waiting for a comic. And I had no money, so I would move from table to table when the waitress would come up and say, oh, can we get you something? Let me just wait a little bit. And then I would go to a different station because I had no money and just was there to watch the comedy and would have to stay all night to see the comedy.
And did they have a 2-drink minimum back then, too?
I don't think Folk City did at that point. But I never bought any drinks, so I have no idea.
But you started to study comedy, it seems, I bet.
I was, yeah. I thought, I'm a little funny around my friends. And I had done a couple of shows. I had done 2 shows at Notre Dame that I had inadvertently ended up hosting. I had said to, I was on a spring weekend committee that had events like tug of war, and it was pie eating contests and that sort of stuff. And I said, I knew a kid that did impressions in my dorm. Mark Tracy did an impression of Ed Sullivan, and I thought, there's probably someone in every dorm that does impressions. Why don't we have an impression contest as part of this weekend? And the head guy, Fritz Hofer, said, sure, but you've got to run it. You've got to be in charge of it. And I said, okay, it'll be, 5 guys under a tree, and I'll hand out a ribbon or something. And it turned out he got a stage and a PA system, set it up on the main quad, and all of a sudden there were 1,000 kids sitting there waiting after lunch for whatever this thing was going to be on main quad. And so I hosted it, and the head priest of Notre Dame, the president of Notre Dame at that point, was a priest named Father Hesburgh, who was world famous for being on the Civil Rights Commission and the boards of different things, and and not only president of Notre Dame, but very well known as a school president. And he walked by; he just happened to be there. And there was a big joke about Father Hesburgh at the time. What's the difference between Father Hesburgh and God?
Oh.
And the difference is God is everywhere. Father Hesburgh is everywhere but Notre Dame. That was the big joke. So all of a sudden he walks by this thing, and we never saw him really at Notre Dame. And I said, and so I introduced him on stage, and I said, oh, there's Father Hesburgh. Or maybe that's Father Burchell doing an impression of Father Hesburgh. And it got a laugh. I did an ad-lib on stage, and it got a laugh. And based on that one laugh, I went to New York on the Greyhound bus, and I thought, oh, maybe they've got comedy clubs or someplace you can do comedy there in New York. I don't think I'd even heard of comedy clubs at that point. And thought, oh, maybe I could try comedy. So
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
Okay. I hear you talk about that in your act, but you never know if it's really true or not, because you are the master
of lying.
Of speaking the truth, but on the cuff, making it sound like you just thought of it for the first time. But your specialty is talking to the crowd, really, right? What do we call it? Riffing?
Yes, or crowd work these days.
Crowd work.
That's a big thing, yep.
Like you're the first Matt Rife, basically, only way better, in my opinion.
Well,
and much better washboard abs, too, I think.
Well, I'm curious, what do you think when you see like younger people doing it now in this new era of social media and all that's going on?
Well, I understand why they do it, because it's disposable, and when you put it on the internet, you don't want to put on your whole act and kind of spend it on the internet, So I can see why people do it, because, it's not,
a throwaway.
It's not reusable. But I always advise people, and comics ask me all the time now in the clubs, they say, I want to do what you do, and I say, don't do what I do.
Why?
And because it keeps you in small clubs and keeps you off TV. To do the Tonight Show with Johnny, I had to learn to do a monologue. So I had been doing stand-up for 7 years, and Leno took me aside at the Comedy Store and said, you're funny enough to do the Tonight Show, you should put together some material. And Jay was not even doing the Tonight Show at that point. Jay had done 4 shots in like 1978, and then he wasn't on again until 86. So Jay wasn't, but Jay just looked at the act and said, you should put some material together. So I worked for 2 years on 10 minutes of material and got the Tonight Show and did the first 5 minutes in June of 84. And then in October, I did the second 5 minutes. And then I was out of material.
And out of a job? No.
Yeah, but it seemed it took me another year to develop another 5 minutes for the show. So I tell people to use that valuable time on stage to work on material, because that's what gets you further.
So how did you ended up being a writer on everyone's show, dare I say? Did you write on Johnny Carson?
No, I just appeared I did 6 appearances on Johnny.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And then your first writing job, how did that come about?
Actually, any fun Johnny Carson stories?
Before we leave Johnny Carson?
Well,
Sorry, what?
Be careful not to...
The video recording, too,
yes,
by the way.
But you just be careful not to slam the microphone down,
and
Josh.
I noticed when I hit the table.
Yes, okay, good.
So,
we'll cut that part out.
Why?
Okay.
It's fine.
So Johnny Carson stories, yes.
Well, doing Carson at that point of our careers in the 80s was unbelievable for a comic. It's what we all aspired to starting out, and, Johnny had been on for 20 years at that point, and it was unbelievable. And I'll tell you how good Johnny was as just an interviewer and being attuned to the guest. On my 6th appearance, they allowed me to sit down on the panel next to Johnny, which was like the next step, and that was like a big deal in a comic's life, to not only do your set, but then to sit down with Johnny after your set. And
they don't let everybody do that. It was only a select few, right?
Well, yes. Yeah. And sometimes you had to kind of earn it, and so this was my final appearance, and before Johnny retired, and they said, "Oh, you're going to sit down with Johnny." Oh, very exciting. So I'm sitting there, and I do a joke, that's and Johnny knows what jokes you're going to do, and there was going to be a joke about TV or whatever the joke was, and and so I finished the joke, and my arms are on the side of the chair like this, and Johnny starts to turn away to go to camera to go to commercial, and I put my finger up like this, just this much. I don't know if you can see this on camera, because I don't think you can see on the Tonight Show. I said my arms are on the chair, and I just put my finger up this much, and Johnny stops, and I do the tag to the joke, and then Johnny starts to turn again, and I've got a second tag to the joke, so I put my finger up again, and Johnny stops again and lets me do the second punchline to it, and they both got laughs. Thank heavens, I'm stopping Johnny Carson. And looking back at it now, I go, what was I thinking? But this was my only time with Johnny, and I thought, well, I'll never do this joke again.
And he just knew.
He knew with that slightest little gesture and movement. And you see sometimes interviewers that will talk over the guest, or
like Josh. No, I'm kidding.
No. He's such a blabbermouth.
I'm at such a disadvantage. I don't have my own mic. These don't work, guys. These don't. This is all fake. This is all fake.
Well, you're talking plenty loud enough.
So,
well, he had done so many interviews by that time. I imagine, just he felt that rhythm that performers do, like you do when you're performing.
Yes.
Even riffing and asking questions of the audience. Do you know what they're going to say? Like, how many people say the same thing all the time? Like if you had to just say, out of all the performances you've had, how many audience members actually have said the same thing? Or is it always different?
There's sometimes there's the same thing. Like some people will have the same profession and that kind of thing.
Right, you've heard a lot. What's the number one profession that you've heard? Like, doctor? No.
Get some doctors, yeah. I get a lot of real estate people for some reason.
Oh.
Which is an odd thing, but it just varies from night to night. I can never predict. Yeah, sometimes there'll be something new, and if I try and squeeze in something I've done before in a different situation, the audience knows it right away. If it's at all phony, the audience senses it in a second.
Yeah.
It's got to be genuine, and you've got to be really in the moment.
So you did all these sets, and you got on the show, and then did you just stop deciding to write material and decide that you just enjoyed messing around with the crowd more, or did you get a job as a warm-up on a show, or a writer, or what happened?
Well, I did a lot of warm-ups because people would see me in the clubs and go, oh, he can talk to the audience, he can warm up the audiences. But they were 3 hours, those tapings. And it was a lot of talking to the audience.
For which shows?
I did Newhart. I did Taxi. I did Cheers. I did the Seinfeld pilot. I did some great shows in the 80s. I'll tell you a story about Newhart, actually. This is one of the hardest. And Newhart was great to do because Newhart would come out and do 10 minutes of stand-up. And they were paying me to watch this every week. It was the greatest, to see Newhart, work.
Do stand-up.
It was unbelievable. And usually the audiences were great. But one night, it was not going well. It was just one of those audiences that just weren't laughing at me or the show, anything. And the first hour, I'm asking people where they're from, and I've no laughs, nothing. Second hour, I'm taking questions from the audience. They don't have questions. It's nothing. It's just horrible, And the third hour, I'm just out of stuff, and I say to the audience, well, maybe you have some jokes. And a 7-year-old little girl, raised her hand. I've got a joke. And I know, what's your joke? And she said, why did the chicken cross the road? And I said, I don't know. Why did the chicken cross the road? And she said, to get away from the warm-up man. And it got the biggest laugh. It got such a big laugh that the cast who was on stage, getting ready for the next scene, all turned around to see what they could possibly be laughing at because they hadn't laughed all night. So that was painful. But generally, Newhart was great. And they told me that, like the first show, he always gets a standing ovation. And I didn't want it to be phony, And so right before he came out, I would say, I don't want to tell you how to behave. as an audience, but every audience we've ever had has given Bob a standing ovation. And then Bob would come out, and he had heard it backstage because he was right behind the curtain. And he would come out and he would pretend to be so touched by the standing ovation that it turned into a little thing where we were both getting laughs on this thing, and I didn't have to phony it up.
Oh,
so it was a great experience.
How awesome.
Yeah. And, Cheers was great. And, yeah.
Did Bob Newhart do a different 10 minutes every week, or was it the same? Do you remember?
Oh, it varied a little bit, but often the same stuff.
And was it him basically going into the scenes and sketches that he would do?
No, not so much the long, those long pieces that he would do, like the driving instructor or something, or the guy on the telephone for long. No, it was more like joke kind of material.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, he was a stand-up first. I mean,
yes.
And he
yes.
had a big career before he got on his show.
Well, but wasn't it true that he kind of developed this whole routine, and that literally the first time he did it, they recorded it, and that was platinum or something?
That's exactly right. He was writing for guys in radio, and so kind of did a radio thing, and then, had never done stand-up. They recorded it in a club in Texas, I think, and that Button Down Mind album was everywhere when I was a kid. Astounding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just like that little girl went on to be Eliza Schlesinger, right? At 7 years old.
I don't know what happened to her. But
Can I say I hope something bad happened to her because of that? I don't know. I
know, it's so mean.
Yeah.
I mean, here he is working his butt off for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I'm still curious about
Yes.
how did you just decide that, has there ever been a moment where you're like, this is my act? Just being? Like, you don't go home at night and think of new jokes or try to write a set. You just go on stage every night of the week now, I think. And
yes, but I will write jokes
okay,
as well, and if it can fit into the conversation, I will work them in.
Yes, but the crowd work's more important. It is your act.
It is my act, and has been almost since the beginning. I tell a story at the end of my act about auditioning for the Tonight Show, but it was really the comic strip in New York. I'd been doing comedy about a year, and the comic strip opened, which was a big deal to have a new club, and there was the owner in the back, and he said, "Okay, do your act," and I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "No, do your act," and I said, "Well, that is my act," and he said, "Thank you very much." And I walked out. That was my entire audition, and all the other comics are waiting, in the bar to go in and audition. They go, "What? You're only in there like 10 seconds." So
and he booked you.
Eventually, I got it, but they didn't trust me for the longest time. And the owner, Richie Tinkin, would tell this story to comics that have since told me this, that they didn't trust that I'd go on. And one night, someone didn't show up. And they said, "Well, we'll just put you on for a couple minutes till someone comes in." And I did okay, and that allowed them to trust me from then on.
Yeah, because I think with crowd work, it's like, I mean, we trust you. We know how well you do it. I mean, I really think you're one of the greatest ever at it.
Oh, thanks.
But we do see younger comics come in here and try, and they just, they always cross the mean line, the hurt line, the bully line, or they're too self-deprecating on themselves.
Or they do. So where are you from? Oh, Colorado. Okay. So where are you from?
There's no jokes. They're not actually.
And when I say they, occasionally, I'm talking about myself.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're from Colorado.
Not me.
Yes.
Do you have advice for younger comics on how to, like you said, earlier you mentioned don't do it, right? Because it is pretty risky. And I was a talent manager for many years, and I have a comedian that still works for us here, the amazing Michael Rayner.
Oh, yeah.
And he does not do crowd work, but he does novelty work with the crowd. Like he juggles shoes and stuff like that. And he's a master at it, but he's never been booked on a cruise ship, He never gets that big headline gig because bookers always told me, too, when I was managing him that, we don't really know what he's going to do in that hour.
Oh,
And so I don't
yeah.
know, did you ever have that happen to you? Or
Well, it was the first time I was seen by The Tonight Show. I was still living in New York, and this was 5 years before I ended up doing the show. And Jim McCauley, who was the booker of the show, came into the Improv in New York, which was pretty rare to have a TV person come into New York in those days. And I come off stage after the first show on a Saturday night, and Chris Albrecht, who was running the Improv at that point,
and then
who became the
eventually
head of HBO, was the manager at the Improv at that point. And he said, "Oh, there's a guy I want you to meet," and it was Jim McCauley from The Tonight Show. And Jim said, "Oh, I see you've got material in between talking to the audience. Could you just put 5 minutes of that together, and I'll stay for the second show and watch you?" And I said, "No, I can't do that." And he went and got in a cab. When I saw him walk out the door, get in a cab, and leave, and I thought, oh, my Tonight Show opportunity just went up 9th Avenue there in a cab. That was done. But
But you know what? On the other hand, it didn't. I mean, you eventually ended up on the Tonight Show. It was kind of the right move, wasn't it? Because if you had tried to, throw it together and not feel confident, it could have been a disaster.
Oh, it would have been, because I wasn't used to working that way, and I had 2 other shows to do at other clubs before I came back to the Improv that night. I had to go up to Catch a Rising Star and the comic strip, and then come back to the Improv. So I didn't even have time to even think about it.
But this is what really works in comedy, is the confidence that you had just being you and doing what you wanted to do eventually paid off, right? I mean,
Well,
clearly.
thanks to Jay's advice that I should work, I worked for 2 years on 10 minutes of material.
Okay.
And I'll tell you a story about that, actually. I worked for 2 years, 10 minutes of
2
material.
years, 10
Yep.
minutes.
And so it's really ready now, And so I called my managers. The managers come in to see me at the Comedy Store on a Monday night in the main room after they've seen Improv, and people are walking around, and it's just chaos for some reason that night. And I can't stay in the 10 minutes of stuff. I've worked on it 2 years, and I can't. I'm stumbling over. I can't get through it. And they go, "Oh, you're not ready. You're not ready." And I go, "Oh, 2 years." So I fly back to New York, where I started, and in 2 weeks I did 56 more sets in the clubs. I would do 3 sets on weekends, on weekdays, and then 6 on weekends, and just ran that set, another 50 sometimes, and came back and said, "Oh, it's really ready now." And I went down to the Comedy Magic Club, and they said, "What club do you want to audition for?" Comedy Magic Club. And so I do the 10 minutes. Jim McCauley comes up to me afterwards and said, "You can do any of that 10 minutes on the show." Great, because often he would tinker with the material or change the order or, cut the jokes or, what he liked. But he said, "You can do any of that 10, so great." So I cut it down to 5 minutes, the 5 best minutes of that set, run it, and then, I get they give me a date for the show. I'm running around the clubs doing it. The night before the show, my managers come into the Improv to see me, and they see the set, and afterwards they say, maybe the other 5 minutes is better. And I've got one more chance at the Comedy Store to run the set before I do the Tonight Show, my first Tonight Show. So we go up to the Comedy Store, and I run the other 5 minutes, and afterwards they go, "Oh, maybe you're right. Do that other 5." So here, my last opportunity before the Tonight Show, the biggest moment of a comic's career, and I'm not sure about the material, just a horrible example of bad management at that point. So, they think they're doing the right thing. They want the best stuff out there, but
managing talent, especially stand-ups, I think is very, very difficult, because stand-up comedians already are very confident, strong. They have an idea of what they want to say. I think the good ones anyway. And so then you have a manager coming in who maybe sees from the outside that maybe you should go this way or that way, and it's an impossible, discussion, because I believe that a great stand-up comedian should be true to their voice no matter what, like you were. You are the master of crowd work, so imagine what this world would be if you hadn't pursued that path, because you've made so many people laugh. And every time they come into Flappers and see you, they always mention that you're one of the favorite comedians they've ever seen in their life. And they always say, the guy that was just messing with the crowd. That's what they'll say, And we go, Jimmy Brogan. And
so nice to hear. Thank you.
But occasionally one of them will say, "Oh, well, let's see the other 5 minutes."
Yes. But then I had to go on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And
And which 5 minutes did you do? A little of the first 5, a little of the second 5?
I did the first 5 that I'd
Great.
been running and running and running. Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. And then at the end got to that okay sign from Johnny, which was everything. Yeah.
So were you at Notre Dame, or when you were coming up in stand-up, who were your friends? Were you friends with Seinfeld or
Yes.
Carol Montgomery? I mean, any of who were
She was
your
a little after when I first started.
right? Who
Yeah,
were
she
your
came on.
tight friends when you first
When
started?
I first started, it was Mark Schiff.
Oh, Mark Schiff.
Yeah, Jerry Seinfeld, Larry Miller. We were all at the comic strip together. And
Larry
another friend, Michael Hampton Kane, who passed away young. It's too bad. Was a great guy and a good comic. And we were all pals. And they all came to my first Tonight Show. Speaking of that first Tonight Show.
And you were on the Tonight Show before Jerry.
No, Jerry had been on already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Jerry was in an airport changing planes because he was on the road and ran into another comic who said, "Oh, did you hear Brogan's doing the Tonight Show Tuesday or something?" And Jerry said, "Oh, no, I didn't know." So Jerry flew back rather than staying on the road, flew back to be with me on the Tonight Show because I had gone to all his Tonight Shows. So he flew back.
How long have you been friends now with Jerry?
Oh, since '76. Jerry started about a year after I did. Yeah.
And did you did you have that feeling that he was going to be big or that you were going to be big, or were you just, tooling around the clubs? Like, I've worked with comics over the years where I'm like, Joel McHale, for example, I was in an improv class with, and I just I knew he had something, he used to come over my house and rehearse sketches, and we took Acme together. And there was something about him. I did a sketch with him once, and all my friends came to see, and they were like, "Oh, you guys were amazing." I'm like, "You mean Joel, right?" Because there was just something. Did you feel that with Jerry, or?
Jerry was good right away because he worked on writing material, which, all of us were just trying to find our way at that point of, what kind of act we would have.
Did you get paid?
Not at that point. That point we would get, if you were a big act in New York, you would get cab fare, $4. So you could go from club to club.
Yes.
And sometimes I would do 3 clubs and I would get cab fare from 3 and only have taken 2 cabs, so I'd be $4.
You made profit.
Yeah. $4 ahead.
Leno was just telling the story about how if you did a 5-minute stand-up set on the Ed Sullivan Show, this is before the Tonight Show. So like back in the 60s, 50s maybe?
No, 50s.
Yeah. They'd pay you $11,000 or like $14,000 in 1950 something to do a 5-minute set on Ed Sullivan.
Wow.
Yeah, it was prime time, and this was the big fight that Ed Sullivan had with Steve Allen, who was the first host of the Tonight Show. They were paying him scale to come on late at night just to talk, because it was a talk show, and but eventually the comics started performing, and Ed Sullivan got mad. That's the same act that they're doing on his show, and he was paying
overpaying.
Well,
not really. I mean, we wish we would pay.
Yes,
That's a lot of money.
Maybe late night was underpaying, but
Right.
But the difference was what caused a huge fight between Steve Allen and Ed Sullivan. Yeah.
But can you believe, back in that's like a year of income from one 5-minute spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And you would have a career after that. Obviously. Ed Sullivan, I mean,
Yes.
I remember my parents talking about it. And,
Yep. Prime time. Yeah. Sunday night, 8 o'clock. And everyone watched it, except for my family. My family was watching Bonanza on the other hand.
Bonanza.
Yeah.
Well, interesting to hear the backside of that, argument and stuff, because we have that same situation now where even in LA sometimes, or New York, well, you get this much at this club, but you don't get this much at this club. And being a club owner, it's really hard. Sometimes, especially nowadays, I mean, comedy is definitely having a resurgence, I think, but live venues aren't necessarily getting the amount of people in as we used to. Even, pre-COVID days, I think we were getting bigger numbers, even for bigger names. So it's really hard to have just a flat fee, to pay somebody.
But I think it's even just beyond the world of stand-up comedy. I mean, I think you look at what actors would get when they did a SAG commercial 30 years ago, and now they're doing a non-union commercial that's only on the web and getting, it's.
Well, I did live appearance, and I worked at the theme parks when I first came to LA, and this was in '92.
Okay.
And I would do 5 shows a day, 20-minute shows, 5 20-minute shows, and I made $60 for the day. The entire day.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Who is your agent? That's good money, $60. Because I was working in New York at the comic strip. I was the day bartender. That was my last day job before I could go full-time getting paid in comedy. And I got $25 a day for that.
Plus tips?
Well, there was no one that came in.
Oh.
For tips. It was, it was more taking reservations and cleaning up the bar and stuff.
This is a great question for you. Do you think it helped you as a comic to work in a comedy club, or did it not make a difference at all?
Well, it was great in that, I could be out till 4 in the morning and then come in at 11 in the morning to the comic strip and make my rent 2 days a week working as the bartender there, and Mark Schiff was the cook at that point.
Oh, see?
Yeah.
Because I've gone back and forth about, do I hire comics? Do I not hire comics?
Well,
it's a tricky one.
Some are irresponsible.
Yes.
I used to pass out flyers. My first job in New York was passing out flyers for a supermarket.
Did they call it barking then? Or
No, this wasn't even for comedy.
It wasn't for comedy. No, it was not.
Just a flyer distributor.
For a supermarket,
Supermarket.
Tomatoes,
Sale.
3 pounds for $1, whatever it was at that point, and had to go through all these buildings and put flyers under people's doors.
How much did you get paid for that?
I got paid $20 for half a day's work, which was good money, because minimum wage at that point was maybe $1.50 or $1.60. So for half a day, it was pretty good. And then the guy who ran it moved back to England and gave me the business. He said, "You run the business while I go back and take care of my dad." And he never came back. And so
you got a business?
But it was only one store at that point. He had a bunch of stores early, but it was only one store. And I would hire comics to work for me, to come Monday morning at 6 o'clock to show up. And, some comics would do it once and never again. But who worked for me? The most conscientious guy, and this is going to surprise you, I think, Gilbert Gottfried.
That doesn't surprise me.
Gilbert Gottfried seems like
he was still living at home with his mom at that point. He was a young comic. He was probably 19 at that point, and that $20 meant a lot to him. And he would show up.
Here, buy some tomatoes. Buy some tomatoes.
Every Monday, and he was great. Yeah, but most other comics would not. Would do it once.
Did he have the voice back then?
No, not in the clubs. He was an impressionist at that point.
That's right.
And a good impressionist. And then started doing kind of weird stuff. But he hadn't gone into the closing his eyes and doing that, yeah.
But see, he was a good salesperson because he shoved those flyers in people's hands, right?
he would show up, which is a big part of
99% of success is showing up.
Did he do voices when he was doing the job at that point? Like, would that to help him get through the job? Or
we would split up. So yeah, and meet up. It was a tall building, a project building that we would. Buildings that we would do. So we would do every other floor. I would go up to the 20th floor, and he would go up to the 19th, and he would do the odds, and I would do the evens, and we'd go on, and then we'd meet up back at the bottom.
The original social media. What? Flyerogram. I don't know.
Well, it
worked. We had to do
rent.
something.
It paid our rent. Yeah. And,
it seems like that would be a good chance for you to practice comedy if you saw people along the way, right? You practice your humor. No?
Well, no, we
How
were
about
just
as the bartender?
trying
Were you able to pull the jokes out when you were the bartender?
No, I think only one guy came in all the time I worked there, which was probably 6 months.
Well, you're a terrible
and-
bartender.
Well, he came in, and said, give me whiskey or something. And I didn't know you put it in a small shot. I had like a water glass and just poured it
They didn't train you to be a bartender?
No. They just needed someone to take
stand there.
reservations and clean up the bar and refill the bottles and stuff.
Oh,
there.
wow.
Yeah. And
They just gave this guy the bottle. Here you go.
just
Whiskey.
I gave him a big water glass full and he said, "How much is this?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you usually pay?" And he just gave me $1, whatever it was,
Wow, that's a good.
So yeah, I had one customer, and I'm surprised he wasn't back pounding on the door every day.
What other crazy jobs did you have before you were a professional comedian?
Those were my only 2 jobs. It was
So you
the
are
flyers.
Wow.
And then but that was 3 years of doing that before I made enough money. Yeah, doing stand up. Yeah.
And did you just know that you were going to make money doing this, or did it not matter? You were like, I'm doing a day job and then I'm going out the clubs at night, and then you just.
Well, I think we had hopes that maybe something would happen, because on TV, Freddie Prinze had been on The Tonight Show and then, got a sitcom, and we thought, maybe there's a chance, but it was just a dream. It wasn't like we really knew anyone that was successful. Yeah.
When I'm just curious. It's you, Seinfeld, a couple other guys sitting around after the show. What were the conversations like and about?
We talk comedy all the time. Yeah. My friend Mike Cain, who I mentioned, who came out for my Tonight Show with me, he and I would go out and eat afterwards at a little place up near our apartment, and then the next day we would meet in the afternoon and run around the lake in Central Park and talk comedy. It was just comedy all the time.
In terms of what other people were doing, and did you see that? bit?
Or
What do you think of
working on
this?
your jokes?
It was
or-
some gossip and some
gossip.
and some career stuff. And
What was the gossip?
Or
We want to hear the gossip.
Well, it was like this guy got in a fight with the owner of the club, or that kind of thing. Which my friend Mike Cain, and this is advice I give to young comics too, he would get somehow offended in the clubs, thinking he wasn't being treated right, and he would say, "Well, I'm never coming back here," and he would walk out, and then eventually he wasn't working anywhere, and he'd have to crawl back and apologize and start again with the club. So
That's happened for us.
I'm sure comics
15 years here now, and yes, comics just. What the hardest part is when they walk in and they expect me to know them, right? And my staff too. And just they get very upset if you don't know them. And I got slammed for someone, young female comic, who didn't get a Coke. Like she came in, and this was probably our second year, like maybe 2012, and she walked in, and I wasn't here that night, but my staff, she asked for a soda, and they were like, okay, well, here's the bill. And she's like, you don't know who I am, and blah, blah, blah. I won't name names on that one, but
Yep.
and it was a big scene. And this is someone who isn't even a comic now, right? Like, just doesn't make any difference. But those things are very dramatic on a club, and the owners and the team, the staff, everybody feels it. They're like, well, that person was a jerk,
Yeah.
What a simple thing, just to be nice. How hard is this?
Yeah, and of course, these are the bosses, when you work in a club, and especially in New York when we were starting out, this was our whole livelihood was, going into these, or not livelihood, but we were risking.
When did you first start getting paid as a stand-up, and what was the amount you made for a set?
Well, the only spots that paid in New York at that point were the MC spots.
Okay, good.
So you're hoping to get to the MC spot. And one night at Catch a Rising Star, Richard Belzer was on the road, and because he was the number 1 MC, and then David Say was the number 2 MC, and he had a gig, and Kelly Rogers was the 3rd MC. So they were out of MCs, and they went to me and said, could you MC this night? And no one trusted that I could do it.
They were
that
scared.
They never.
What's he going to say?
Yeah, and so they said, well, rather than doing 20 minutes, which you normally did, they said just do 10, and so I did, and I did well, and then started getting $35 to MC at Catch a Rising Star, and then when the other clubs heard that I was MCing there, the Improv and the Comic Strip, I started getting spots there, MC spots also, which was $35. So that was enough that I could quit my day job and make enough money. Yeah.
Not today.
Well, I'll tell you that because that was 1978. Yeah. I had made $2,000 the year before, which was not enough to live on. Then I made $4,000 the next year.
I love these numbers.
And that was enough because I needed $3,600 to pay my rent and everything. That my nut was $300 a month, so I needed $36, and I made $4,000, so I was $400 ahead that year. And the next year, I got a TV show and made $10,000 a week.
What TV show was that?
It was called Out of the Blue. It was a sitcom on ABC.
Oh.
And went from New York to out here.
I think I remember that. What year
Where
was
you're the angel.
I played an angel.
I
on the sitcom.
remember that.
Really? Oh, yeah. It came and went pretty quick. But
Yeah, but I definitely am having a vision of that show.
But it was great for me, and I got to.
That's huge money at the time.
It was
Yeah.
astounding.
Yeah.
to go from $4,000 for the year to $10,000 a week doing a sitcom.
So see, now today we're talking about this being a gig economy, but that's basically what you did most of your career. You went from this gig to that gig to that gig, right? And
yes. Yeah. But then the comics started getting paid in New York. And this was right before I left. I got the TV show, and then there was the Comedy Store strike out here.
Yeah,
and
that was a big deal.
And
in
I
the
ended
80s.
Yeah. In 1979 it was. And I was out here doing the pilot for this TV show, and I walked the line with Tom Dreesen and George Wallace and
Tom
guys.
Dreesen,
Yeah. And Tom Dreesen for years said, I've got a picture of us on the strike line that night. And finally sent it to me a few years ago, and I posted it on Facebook, and it's still controversial.
Yeah.
Some comics saying, oh no, Mitzi shouldn't have paid us. And you go, what? Fighting against their own self-interest, puzzling to me. But so to finish the story is, so I go back to New York, and the Comedy Store strike settles, and we hear about it in New York, and we have a meeting at Seinfeld's apartment, his studio apartment, a bunch of comics from
Who
the
else was
clubs.
there? Who else was there? I
Well,
love it.
there were. I remember Glenn Hirsch was there from the Improv, because he represented the Improv, and because I did all three of the clubs, I was there. Jerry was there, Larry Miller, and I can't remember who else. Mostly probably comic strip
Yeah.
people, because Jerry was only a comic strip act at that point. And we said, they settled in California. We should go to the owners. And so Jerry and Larry Miller and Glenn Hirsch and I were deputized to go to the owners and bargain with them. And it was scary. These were adults. We were kids. And
How old were you at the time?
I was 25. No, I was 28 at that point, I think. Yeah. But these were guys that scared us. These were tough bar owner New York guys.
And what was your argument? We're bringing the money into the club, or
the clubs
No?
were packed. I mean, the comic strip at that point
It was big, and
was 3 shows on a Saturday night.
Wow.
They added, a 6:00 show because they
Too
could.
many people. Yeah.
Yeah, they could, and it was so packed that
And you guys weren't even making anything really
That's right.
at
yeah.
that time.
And then we had a big meeting at the comic strip to sort it out with all the comics, and they had offered us $10 for a weekday spot and $25 for weekends, which was less than Mitzi had settled for, because Mitzi was $25 on weekdays, $50 on weekends. And so, but we couldn't get all the comics to agree at that point. There were comics that were managed by Rick Newman at Catch a Rising Star, and of course they didn't want to go against Rick because they were all doing well. And then there were comics who were late night who thought, oh, if comics are getting paid, there'll be fewer spots and we won't get spots. So they were kind of against us. So we settled for the $10 on weekday and $25 on weekends, and that started New York clubs paying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so it was a
they,
huge deal.
to this day, you can pop around and get a $50, $75, $125. But the
Yeah,
spots in New York, but the clubs are close together. Out here, it's so hard to even go
It's
from
hard.
club. You can't even go to all the clubs in one night because
Yes.
of traffic.
Well, in New York, I would do on weekends. I would do 6 sets on a Friday and a Saturday night.
Wow.
I would start at the comic strip, and then I would take a cab to the Improv, and then cab to Catch a Rising Star,
Yeah.
and then walk back to the comic strip from there, and then take another cab and 6 sets. And so I would start at 8 at night, and I would end at 4 in the morning. I'd have the 3:40 spot at Catch a Rising Star, which
They were
final-
going on till that time of night?
The second show, and I don't even know, it's unfathomable at this point, started at 1 o'clock at night, and it started late because the first show had run long or something. And so, yeah, it was insane. Yeah, but I would get that last spot and have no idea what material I had done in what club that night after 6 sets. But
That just doesn't happen anymore. Nobody goes that late. You can't even stay, like, venues aren't even open that late.
yeah.
Do you think COVID did that to us? Or,
Well, I think California was always different.
yeah.
You know, the Comedy Store would close, maybe 2 o'clock, because the liquor
Yeah.
laws were different out here.
Yeah,
than
that's
in
true.
New York, so, and New York was just a late night city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you miss those days? Do you think it was the better comedy? Would you say those were the golden days of comedy, or the 80s, or it's coming back, or what's
And
your take on that?
It's all been fun to me.
Yeah.
In New York was great, because you could live cheaply and not have a car.
Yeah.
And, but coming out here was great too. The
Right.
Comedy Store and the Improv were great to me.